I see these ridiculous LinkedIn and Facebook posts saying, hire the best people and then leave them alone to do their job. I could not imagine a dumber bit of advice ever. I've never heard anything that stupid in my life. We do not hire people and leave them alone. We hire people and love them and support them and coach them and mentor them and give them feedback and challenge them and ask them what resources they need and check in with them. And sure, we don't micromanage them, but we do all the other things. So we do not hire people and leave them alone. We hire people and we build people first who then build things. And that's part of what we've lost track of in our industry. And so it's two parts. That we as leaders have got to stop being so gosh darn busy to where we actually take the time, and the people who are actually needing to take the time need to actually ask for the time. And so when those two worlds come together, we're going to get right back on track.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the CM Mentors podcast, where each week industry-leading guests share their insights and guidance to help the next generation of construction management. My name is Matt Graves. My co-host each week is Kyle Grandell. And this week's guest is multi-time author and founder of Elevate Construction, Jason Schroeder. Welcome and thanks for joining us, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure, and I'm excited to be here with you. So it's an honor to be invited on the podcast. I love most of the time I'm interviewing or doing a solo podcast, and I just love being asked questions. So go ahead. Let's do this. Yeah.
I've been on a number of podcasts too, on the podcast side, and now hosting one. It's a whole different experience, so it's fun.
Okay. Yeah, I love it.
For those that don't know you, Jason, can you give us a little bit short background on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently I'm 41. I'm married to Kate Schroeder. She's the CEO of our company and thankfully my eternal companion. We've got 11 kids and they range from 5 to 19. They're all ours. We pay taxes. We pay for their health insurance, the whole nine. So we got a big family. They're super expensive, and I just absolutely just adore them. I grew up. All of my ancestors are from Germany, and they were builders there in Europe and in the United States. Like everybody, the exception is my grandfather was a cattle rancher, but like building is just in my blood. And my dad drove a ready-mix truck for a concrete company in Southern California. And I didn't go to college. I started up through the trades. I was a cement mason, finisher to most people, form setter, equipment operator, and worked my way up. Started with Hensel Phelps, was able to be a rodman, then a field engineer, and then just literally worked my way up through the ranks and had a great time. So I was trained by Hensel Phelps for 14 years. Just like they used to do, I don't know if they do anymore, I'm not saying they don't, but like Hensel Phelps was like the training company, and they just beat those concepts in me over 14 years, and I loved it. And then I went to work for DPR for 4 years, really got to know lean culture, this progressive idea of business, and then was able to start to work with companies scaling these techniques, and was able to start our own business. So we cashed in our retirement. Katie and me started the business for the purpose of really taking care of the industry, making sure that people have fun again, respect their trades, and make sure they can go home well to their families. And that's not just talk. Like our systems and training are doing that for people. So it's hard, doesn't pay very well, but it's super fun. It's very rewarding. So that's me.
How long have you been doing your own business?
So it was mid 2020. So what is that? It's almost 3 years now. Yeah. Wow. So
awesome, man.
So we're already, what is it? Most businesses, like 90% of businesses fail in the first year, and then the other 9% of the 10% in the next 5. So we're looking towards our 5-year milestone.
There you go.
That's so cool. Was COVID a driver to kind of stopping and starting something fresh?
No, it was really just the timing when everything was right. So Elevating Construction Superintendents, our first book, like I've been working on that thing since I was like 28, and just gathering information, like stealing it from superintendents. And I was able to train with Hensel Phelps, meaning fly around the country, around the nation doing training. And everywhere I would interview general superintendents and operations managers. And so I was taking these stories and things. And when I was working in Oakland, doing a employment but consulting thing, I really started to put that together. And as soon as that book came together, that's when we felt like it was the time to start doing the podcast, because the systems were kind of put together. And once the podcast started, it really just took off from there, because the podcast, LinkedIn are ways that people really got to know us, and it really drove that connection. So that's really what the driver was.
That's all. That's such a cool story. You got another one coming out in a couple weeks, right?
Yep. It's elevating construction foreman, depending on where the industry is headed. So like I care about our industry being inclusive and diverse, but I don't really care what we call things. So I put out a poll yesterday. I was like, should we do foreman, forepersons, or crew leaders? And so I'm waiting to hear back on that. So depending on what we do there, that book's coming out. But that's probably, so we have elevating construction superintendents, senior superintendents, surveyors. There's a book called Tax Planning and Integrated Control for Scheduling and Last Planner. And then this one will be specifically for that foreman crew leader position. And I'm probably more stoked about this than anything that we've ever published, because it talks about that leadership, how to lead a crew, the day in the month, week, or life of a foreman. And then it goes into specifically how to actually maintain production. So people talk about production, and this applies to project managers and supers too. I know you have a lot of PMs and office-minded folks that listen to your show. This applies to both. But like, people talk about flow and production all the time, and like literally, I'm not being insulting, but like 99.9% of the people in our industry have no idea what that means. And I had to go scratch and claw and beg and find people that knew what the heck it meant. And after doing that, in North and South America and Europe, finding that information, and actually some research from Japan, we finally know what it means to flow and achieve that production. So we put that into bite-sized pieces that foremen can follow as they work in zones with their crews. And I'm just freaking stoked about it. Like, I hope it's well received, because it's the exact foundation that I think foremen need to really live and operate in a remarkable manner. So
that's so cool. And Kyle, like we talked with Alex Vachera, one of the topics was, there's not a lot of support for kind of, we call it like the middle management stuff, but like a foreman, it feels like that's like the first leadership role, right? You kind of become a crew leader, you become a foreman. And those guys, like, they're trained on the tools. They don't have any leadership training, formal training, typically.
Yeah.
So that's such a cool resource.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. So there's there's a couple of like really stodgy books for superintendents out there in the industry. There's a little bit more for PMs. I forgot his name, but anyway, really good guy. But he wrote the book, The 5-Minute Foreman, and that's a neat little book. But this, other than some of these other references, this is really the first like full volume of how to do this soup to nuts, and I'm pretty stoked. Yeah, can you believe that we've been building things for so long and we don't have books for foremen, field engineers, surveyors, and superintendents? Like, this is insane, man. Like, and even if there's technical stuff like university textbooks, like something that can really like get them like the right help that they need. So I agree with you. It's pretty cool.
And written in a way that they'll actually read it too, because no one wants to read a textbook.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, when I first started reading that writing, this sounds corny. I don't know if your listeners will connect with this, but I prayed about it. I'm like, hey, what should I be doing? And the immediate thought was intro, story, quote. Intro, quote, story, application. Every chapter, intro, quote, story, application, over and over and over and over. And the stories and those bite-sized chunks have really, in my opinion, connected like you're talking about. It's really the format.
That's so cool. And that was like a driver for us on this too. It's instead of the field, kind of more the office route, but kind of that construction manager, that entry level, like, me and Kyle, I mean, everyone I talked to, we kind of had the same conversation. One thing we bonded on was like the fact that like when you get out of college, like you don't know anything. Yeah. Like you don't know. I remember my first job, they're like, hey, can you put together this submittal? And I was like, I don't even know what that is. Like write an RFI. Like I don't even know what that is. And there's nothing out there to really take you by the hand and walk you through this. You know, you got to be trained by Hensel Phelps if you're with a really good company, or if you're a real small company, sometimes you just get thrown to the wolves.
Yeah. And we've, back in the day, and I'm not going to mention any companies by name, but these big companies used to be like, 800 million, billion, 1.5 billion, right? Now they're $16 billion a year. And yes, there's inflation as a part of that. I get it. But they were doing more training, in my opinion, from my observation, when they were like 100 million, 800 million, 1.5 billion dollar companies than they are when they're like $9 billion, right? And I think this is a suspicion that I have. As revenues increased, the same budget line items on the job cost reports, like the same reports came out, and they see that number growing, and they're like, oh, we got to cut back. But what I don't think people realize is that the training increases of the company should have grown proportionately with the people they're hiring and their revenue. And they're not. And I can honestly say that I believe that we are doing less per employee training than we did 15 years ago. Like, that's at least in my circles, in my narrow field, we're doing less training. And so we can't just go blame it on the workforce or the industry or whoever. Like, who had the money to train people? It was the owners, it was the general contractors, and it was the train partners. And we're the ones complaining about, like, a entry-level worker or a foreman's not going to go spend $20,000 out of the gate and go provide that training. Who was going to provide that training? We were going to provide that training. So we've got to get that rein back in, to your point. It's just such a huge part.
Yeah, and maybe as those companies get bigger, and especially if they become public companies, they don't really, the employees kind of maybe some second nature to the stockholder too. So trimming costs everywhere they can.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know exactly what's going on, but we gotta double, triple, quadruple our training. 100%. Good training.
Hey, Jason, would you say that you see a certain sector in construction maybe that's more affected by the lack of training than other sectors, or any trends that you're seeing with that?
No. Let me say this: the trend that I'm seeing that is deficient everywhere, and I think there's a couple things. So obviously, it's a part of the system. It's a part of people not being willing to pay for it. It's a part of the fact that in the U.S., at least, the amount of work that we have has grown exponentially. Like, now we have like billion dollar projects back in the day. I don't know if you remember, but they were like, oh wow, that's unheard of. Like, that's a big Intel building or something like that, or that's an airport. Now billion dollar projects are like the norm. Like, they're like in Phoenix, there's Intel, there's Facebook, there's some development complexes, there's the Taiwan Semiconductor, there's the expansions on the, like, it's just normal, right? Like, construction has just grown. So I do think that that's part of it. But what I've noticed is that of all of these things that have affected the system and turned us to not train as much, even the best of the best are being affected. I will go visit projects for large construction companies that know what they're doing, and nobody knows who I'm talking about. Nobody try and guess, but like large construction companies. And some of these superintendents and PMs, like, literally are young doesn't have anything to do with it. They're a lot younger, but they have no idea what they're doing. Like, literally, they don't have the basics of survey and control. And I'm not criticizing. I'm saying nobody provided that. They don't have survey and control. They were never taught AutoCAD. They never got into the basics of actually, like, creating lift drawings. They don't know how to run the schedule themselves. They don't know how to put together like a procurement. Let me go on a rant here for a minute. Like, everybody's like, COVID-19 affected our supply chains. We can't get anything. Yes, totally agree, that messed up. But I'll ask job site teams, where's your procurement log? I want to see what you're dealing with. They're like, well, we don't do that. The trades do that. What do you mean? What do you mean the trades do that? Where is your procurement on a schedule or on your project management software or in a log? Where is it? Well, we don't really, we have some of them, but we just trust the trades. No, procurement logs or procurement on the schedule, or at least the submittal register, as you all know very well, is project management 101, and nobody taught them these things. And so we have people, God bless them, they're great people, running multi $100 million projects without the basic tools of how to do it. And so it's really just habit, the common habits of the people, whatever they know, keeping these jobs running, instead of a common collectively trained intelligence, right? It's not like a common system, a common taught system. It's habit. Now, what I want to have the system and the people trained together, and I want the trained system with habit merged together to where it literally everybody knows what should be done. They're taught, they implement it, and it's reinforced through observation. And so that's what I'm seeing everywhere. It could be a $500,000 project. It could be a $5 million project. It could be a $3 billion project. There are very few trained people these days, not because of their own fault. It's because they were not forced to be field engineers. They were not forced to go learn in the field. They were not forced to, and forced maybe sounds like a bad word, but they didn't get to work with the craft. They didn't learn AutoCAD. They didn't learn lift drawings. They didn't learn how to actually put these systems together. They didn't learn how to write contracts. All of these things were just something they knew to do, and they got promoted past. And so I want to fix that. They deserve better. Like, these people are smart, they're capable, they care, they deserve that kind of basic training.
I've even seen like entry level, construction managers, like project engineers, office engineers, whatever you call it. They're pushing paper all the time. They don't even get a chance to walk out in the field and talk to the trades and really learn what's happening on the project. Like everything, their whole idea of project management is sitting behind the computer and just pushing papers.
Yeah. It's gotta change if we're ever gonna make the right kind of progress. So yeah, that's totally my thoughts in that direction.
So Jason, what got you into this movement, I'm calling it, of going towards lean construction, going towards the way things should be? What was there, like an aha moment for you, or some kind of specific thing that happened, or what's your story there?
Well, really, that's an interesting thing. So I've always accidentally been on good jobs. So back in the day, and let me say this: bad projects, crash landed projects, were not the norm back in the day. Just period, end of story. It just wasn't a thing. Crash landed projects were very much like a one-off, and everyone knew about it, right? So when I grew up at Hensel Phelps, I was constantly on massive projects that ran very, very well. And there's something that I call learned hopelessness. I hope I'm not taking too long, but there was a study that they did with German Shepherds, unfortunately. And I'm sad that they did this, but they did the study, so we might as well use the data. They took dogs and they would put them in a cage, and they would shock them. They did another cage where half of the cage was shocked and half of the cage wasn't. And then the third one, they did no shock. And then they would move all of the dogs to 3 cages where it was half and half. And the cages where the dogs were shocked, when you moved them, or where it was half and half, when you moved them, they wouldn't segregate. When you took the cage that wasn't shocked of dogs into the new cage, they would all move from the shock side to the non-shock side. And so what they called it is they figured out that with animals, and that includes humans, there's a sense of learned hopelessness. And one of the things I put in the superintendent book, the worst thing that a person can do is come out of school or from the trades and be on 2 or 3 bad jobs, because then they get learned hopelessness and they're like, well, this is just the way it is. I guess this is just my life. I accidentally, of no earning of myself, like no merit on my own, was able to accidentally be on a big job. And so I got programmed. This is how you do it. This is how you set up logistics. This is how you organize a team. This is your trailer. This is how you treat trade partners. And so that was programmed. And then once I was at DPR, I already knew scheduling at Hensel Phelps, but once I learned about lean, and I took the DBIA course and the CM Lean course and the CM BIM course and Lean Core, and started doing Tony Robbins training and all these training, I got the opportunity to then combine that in an 8-month pre-construction period and go build a $100 million project and just implement it. And it was like, wow, like this is amazing. Now, one of the biggest things, and you can cut this out if you want to, but this is pretty forward, like tact construction with last planner, with Scrum, which Felipe talks about, is the way. Meaning it forms a system. Like if people say, well, should I use tact on this project or last planner, or should I use Scrum? And that's, in my mind, and I'm not being insulting, that's like saying, in my body, do I want my nervous system, my circulatory system, or my respiratory system? Which one are we picking here? I want all of them. They work as a system, and it's a complex system at that. And so one of the big things that got me into Lean is I was able to learn from Hensel Phelps about SIP scheduling, short interval production schedules. And they're a lot like tact plans. And it's basically where you design a project with zones and you run a train of trades through those zones. And instead of focusing on a critical path with a deliverable-based WBS, everything is based by location, and it's focusing on a critical flow or a critical flow path. And so that is the scheduling system that we will have to transition to in construction and away from others in order to really elevate our industry. And so that training from Hensel Phelps like really programmed and brainwashed my mind to where all of these other concepts are starting to pull in. Like, for instance, if you have a builder, they think like that already. They don't think by deliverable and they don't think by scope. They think, I'm going from a level 1 area A to level 1 area B to level 2 area A to level 2 area B, and my crew and a crew behind me is coming through, right? That's how builders think. And so it's only when we start to have schedules and production systems that are designed that way that will really start to elevate in construction. And that is the basis for all other lean thinking. Scrum, last planner, just in time, continuous improvement, all of these other concepts, visual management, they all fit into that framework. And so that's how the journey kind of started. It was an opportunity at DPR, a good base from Hensel Phelps, and really being programmed into that time by location, time by zone mental framework. So does that answer the question?
Answers mine for sure. That's pretty good. Actually, could we do it again?
we can do that. We're on the Elevate Construction podcast. We're on episode 770. So that people will say to me sometimes, you can just riff, and it's like, well, after you've made 1,000 videos, which you all know a lot about, and done 770 solo podcasts, you just wire yourself to like think like that. So I can do it again if you want, whatever you want. So. That's not bragging. I'm just saying it happens accidentally because of the world we live in, right? It's a very social media world that we're in.
Kyle, this is going to be episode 6 when it goes live, so we've got a few more to do.
We're pretty close. We're pretty close.
Yeah. But hey, you're doing good. You know, any of that, people like diversity. People, even 770 episodes, like they want to hear from Felipe, they want to hear from Adam, they want to hear from you guys, they want to hear from these different people. So, like, I think this is great.
So if, we talked about earlier about companies aren't training their people like they used to. So if you're, this whole podcast is really kind of tailored towards kind of entry to mid-level kind of construction professionals, managers, hopefully some field people as well, superintendents, foremen type thing. So if you're kind of in one of those companies that may not be training you like they should be, do you have any tips for those type of people of how they can kind of go train themselves or get their own training? It's hard to go find it if you don't really know what you're looking for.
There's just so much of it really quick too. So
yeah, you know what? Hey, I think I've got the perfect answer. Number one, I would tell anybody read 2 books: How to Win Friends and Influence People and Think and Grow Rich. There's other books like Focal Point or The One Thing that are pretty good, but Think and Grow Rich will get somebody like to believe that they can be something more, and How to Win Friends and Influence People will immediately get them hooked on listening to a good narrator, to a good book, really being able to implement content right away. And my second bit of advice would be get addicted to reading. And I'm sure you all do this as well. If you can't read a book a week, read every 2 weeks. Read a book every 3 weeks. Read every month. but you've got to at least get a book every quarter, whether it's reading or audio. The other thing that I would say is that don't be in so much of a rush. It really is a myopic view for people to come out of school or to be promoted and be like, now I want super, now I want this, now I want this. Spend the time. It's the analogy of the cheetah and the gazelle, right? I can't remember the exact amount of seconds. I think it's like 4 or 5 seconds that a cheetah can run at full speed, and then you see on National Geographic, they're like huffing and puffing, they're like out of breath, they have to stop, they're spent, right? And then you see the gazelle, they don't run as fast, they've got to outmaneuver the cheetah, but they can run long distances consistently. And a project engineer or a new incoming assistant project manager or whatever they are, or project coordinator or field engineer or assistant, whatever their role is, if they will take the time to really learn in those entry level roles, they will have an endurance run. And if they rush, they will be like the cheetah and they will wear out. I have seen data in massive companies where PMs and supers get stuck at the PM super 1 level because they don't have the foundation to go farther. They don't have the survey. They don't have the background in writing contracts. They haven't made procurement logs. They don't know the details of figuring out plans. They can't make lift drawings. They can't visualize things in 3D. They never learned AutoCAD. They never learned how to piece together the schedule. They don't know the basics of how to put together a Gantt chart. And this is not a criticism. This is, if I had to give anyone advice and they're a PE, go be a PE really well. And when you get a chance to go do your training for your project management software, go do it. And when you get a chance to go run an OAC, go do it. When you get a chance to put together a lift drawing or really do a detailed shop drawing review or submittal review that you have to own and build, go do it. And when you get to go work with that foreman, go do it. And when you get to go learn survey, go do it. And put these tools in your tool belt, because if you're in an emergency, like people look at like martial artists or, special forces units, or you look at like Black Widow in the Avengers, like on the in the movies, and they're like kicking and throwing and blah blah blah, and they think everything happens magically in the moment. Heck no. What happens is they've accrued all these tools and techniques, and it's muscle memory. Like when they're really good at something, like if you get a really good construction manager and they're like, we'll do this. Well, this is how we recover. This is how we submit a time impact analysis. I'll go negotiate. I'll negotiate this change order. This is how we project our contingency. Let's go ahead and look at our financial projections. Tool, habit. Like all of these things are muscle memory. And if you want to be the ninja or the special forces of construction, we've got to have those tools. So if you want to go be Black Widow, or you want to go be a special ops team, or you want to go be like the best of whatever you're doing, or the best of the best construction manager, you don't skip the tools. That's like saying, I want to be a Navy SEAL, but I don't want boot camp. I want to be a Navy SEAL, but I don't want to do the entry level work. Just send me. I'll pass without training. Do the basics of training. So give it more to be specific. Entry level people, give it more time. Start with how to win friends and influence people, and Think and Grow Rich. Start reading a book a week. And then the other thing I would say is go ask for the training. Go say, I want this training. Some companies like DPR, they used to, I don't know anymore, they'll offer you $5,000 of reimbursements for training. Go sign up for that CM Lean course. Go sign up for that scaffolding course. Go sign up for it. No one will own your career. You have to own your career. And careers are not built off of smooth talking and elegance. It's built off of the aggregation of marginal gains. It's built off of accruing these small abilities one by one until you've mastered the role. That's my advice.
That's a lot of what Marty said.
Well, I was just thinking something very similar. Both Marty and Angelo, I mean, tying all the messages in together, it's being not afraid to take risks and try new things and do new things, but even more than that, it's being willing. it's signing up for those additional tasks, just like you're saying, Jason, to go learn those different skills and get those tools in your tool belt. So yeah, we just
Yep.
keep going full circle here, Matt.
I think it's it's confirmation that everyone, all these leaders in the industry are saying the same thing. So
Yeah. And this isn't the old generation like making fun of the new. It's a lot of us, and I'm not an old timer, I'm only 41. I've only been in the industry 24, 25 years plus 8 years of like in my teenage years. But so that's a while. So that's any 24 to 32 years. But the point is that a lot of us nowadays are like, yeah, just go figure it out. But we forget, for the most part, any of the great old timey people you see had a mentor, even if he was a jerk. Even if it was a she, probably wasn't a jerk. And so I'll just say he. Even if he was a jerk or a complete a-hole or like just totally not approachable, somebody was grilling us, drilling us, yelling at us, teaching us, mentoring us. We were following them, and we're not even giving that. Like here's the thing, people are like, let's all be nice nowadays, which I totally agree with, but even yelling at somebody would be kinder than just throwing them off in the distance and being like, figure it out without anything. We didn't have to figure it out when we were growing up. All of us had something, and then we used that something to figure it out. And so nowadays we're just telling people, here's not something, just go figure it out and make it out of whole cloth. That's ridiculous. And so sometimes I see, just one last point here, I see these ridiculous LinkedIn and Facebook posts saying, hire the best people and then leave them alone to do their job. I could not imagine a dumber bit of advice ever. I've never heard anything that stupid in my life. We do not hire people and leave them alone. We hire people and love them and support them and coach them and mentor them and give them feedback and challenge them and ask them what resources they need and check in with them. And sure, we don't micromanage them, but we do all the other things. So we do not hire people and leave them alone. We hire people and we build people first who then build things. And that's part of what we've lost track of in our industry. And so it's two parts. That we as leaders have got to stop being so gosh darn busy to where we actually take the time, and the people who are actually needing to take the time need to actually ask for the time. And so when those two worlds come together, we're going to get right back on track.
that's I love that, dude. Hey, going back to, I'm speechless, like, that's such a great point.
Matt,
going back a minute ago when you were talking about a little bit. No, that's a big, like, I love it. I mean, just supporting the people, and like so many, I think in construction, everyone gets siloed very easily, right? Because in general, y'all are on that project, y'all are on that project, you're on that project, and like there may be an office, but no one's at the office in general, right? Everyone's out on these silos, and so like you may be on a 2 or 3 man project team, or however big your project team, smaller or maybe bigger if you want a bigger project, but it's so easy to lose people and forget about people, and don't do all those things and support them like you were talking about.
I agree. It's 100%. All right, what's next, boss?
So going back to what you were talking about a minute ago, you were talking about getting all these tools and putting all these tools together to kind of be a well-rounded person. It was just made me think, like, construction is stereotypically a super stressful industry. But one thing that I found is, like, when you have all these tools and you practice, and like all these things become routine, you're not stressed about the change order you got to go present. You're not stressed about putting together this delay claim like you were talking about. Like they just become routine, right? If you do them so much, and you got the tools to do it, it's no longer that stressful. It's just part of another day of the job.
Yeah, I agree. I as you were saying that, I was thinking, like, I've got 11 kids, and it's expensive, but it's very manageable. Meaning that we were able to learn from ourselves and from other people. How do you put them into buddy systems? How do you do head counts in and out of vehicles? How do you, cook dinner for that many people? How do you do laundry? It isn't so much the scale, it's the know-how, to your point. Meaning, and the other thing that people get wrong is they think like $1 billion project or a $500 million project is harder than $5 million. And I would actually say it's probably the opposite. A person on a $5 million project has to know, permitting, make ready, entitlements, project startup, contracting, quality control process, all the things all the way down to warranty and closeout and change orders and reconciliation and lien waivers and all these things. When somebody on a mega project, they're like, yeah, I do submittals for this, so it's not really the scale, small or big. To your point, it's about knowing what to do. And that information we have, this is what pisses me off. I hope you don't have to cut that out, but we know everything that we need to know today to run every project in the United States perfectly well. I'm telling you, and some people are like, well, what about supply chain? Even with supply chain, today, we know we have the collective knowledge of how to run remarkable projects nationwide, coast to coast, today. It is the systems that are holding us back, right? It is the lack of sharing that's holding us back. It's the fact that we're motivated by other things that's holding us back. We know today exactly how to run remarkable construction projects. And that's what people need to know, is that it's not the scale like you're saying, it's the transfer of that knowledge. And so it really does come back to training and scaling. It really does. Because right now, this sounds arrogant, but I'm just going to tell you, if a project site called, let's not use me as an example, but let's say they were like, hey, let's get Matt, Kyle, Felipe, Hal Makeover, Adam, Jason together, Jesse, a couple of people together. In a couple of days or a day, we could come up with a flawless plan that could be flawlessly executed in a flawed world, and you could finish that project ahead of time, under budget, with a raving fan client with a really good team. So what's the problem? Why don't we do that? We're in our silos. We're too busy. We're stuck behind emails. I don't have the budget for it. I'm a competitor, which is something I'm really getting annoyed at. We should not be competitors in the construction industry. It should be a co-opetition, which is something that they came up with at Facebook. We are cooperating and sharing because, what do they say? Rising tides elevates all ships, or whatever it is. We have got to stop this human behavior that's keeping us from sharing and scaling, because today we know how to do it. And we're still talking about, in conferences and road shows and things, here's what we do. Why in the world are we still talking about the same concepts we were talking about 15 years ago? For the love, my goodness, how do we all not know this? It's because of the siloed, non-collaborative approaches, and we're not sharing, teaching, and scaling this information. We should be past that. We should be implementing a baseline. We should have all projects on the similar minimum standards, and the industry should be talking about how we improve it from there. We should not be talking about the same thing we were talking about 20 years ago. It blows my mind.
Do you think these are just excuses that people are hiding behind? Just to, not really put in the effort, but to say, well, it is what it is, and we're kind of just, I got all these other excuses, I can't do it?
No,
without having to really think outside the box?
Actually, I don't. I think that people are coming to work doing the best that they can, and they're affected by the system. Now, this is where it gets complex. The system, meaning the contracts, the organizational structures, the industry, the way the AEC industry works, is a system. The only way the system is going to change if the people change the system. So it is a feedback loop between the system and the people. But most of the people coming in, your audience, are simply victims of the system. And so it's only going to be when the owners, the general contractors, the leaders, the change makers really change it. Now I read a book based on Hal Mako. Do you guys know Hal? If not, you need to get him on your podcast. He's
Who is it?
Hal Makeover. He's probably the most widely underrated and overqualified lean and construction expert I've ever been around in my entire life. But he asked me to read this book called The Triumph of Classical Management Over Lean Management. And my mind was blown when I read it. in construction companies, you have, and typically, I'm a white male, all of you are white males. I'm going to tease white males for a minute. I don't have any problem with white people. If we were in a country predominantly with black and brown people or other ethnicities, you'd have the same problem of having too many of the same kind of people. But in the United States, we got a bunch of constructionists run by a bunch of crusty old white dudes, right? So like you got all the crusty old white dudes in a room, and they will never experience what the craft workers experience. They don't know what it's like. They're not in the conditions. They're not out in the cold. They're not in the porta potties without toilet paper. They're not eating lunch on the ground. They're not holding a sandwich with feces and urine on their hands. They're not working overtime. They're not away from their families. They're not in these crappy conditions. Who has the money? Do the workers have the money, or does the leadership team have the money? It's all of the leaders, the brotherhood, the boys club up here that have the money. And they are still, whether you make 2% margin on net profit on a project, or 4% net profit, or whatever it is, they're still going to drive home in their BMW to their family. That's it. And so why would they spend money from here, from the boys club, to fix something here that they don't even experience and can't even connect with because they're not even in that world? The system of segregation is broken, and the only way this gets fixed is when you have the boys club, and hopefully it's turning into a boys and girls club, and hopefully it's turning into a boys and girls and diverse club on the leadership teams, until you get these leadership teams to not only be diverse male and female, to not only be diverse with ethnicities and backgrounds and social or protected classes. Not only do they need to be diverse with their backgrounds, but they need to be diverse with their experience, meaning that they need to connect and get out of the office and into the field at the place where the work is happening. That is where production is driven. That is where the industry changes. That is where we make the changes. And so we are not going to make a change until that hierarchy is broken. And we get not only diversity in the social classes, but also diversity of experience and care throughout the levels of our organization. And so if you think about it, why would a leadership team member, the crusty old white dudes in the office, why would somebody's like, hey, I want to spend $40,000 to train our craft and to make nice bathrooms. What do you think the rest of the group's going to say? Why? Why would I do that? I'm not affected by that. How does that affect my world? How does that affect me getting home on time to my family? If they're not there, if they don't have proximity, there's no motivation to change it. And so what I'm saying is that today, owners, leaders of construction companies, policymakers, politicians, spec writers, it is us. No one else is coming to fix this. It is us that have to fix this. The people coming into the industry are partially victims to the system. And the paradox is the system will only get fixed in a feedback loop with the people that are currently here. And so we need to snap out of it, wake up, realize what we're doing to people, and we need to have the courage to fix it today. And so my message to people is, hey, I tanked my retirement. Hundreds of thousands of dollars gone. I put in my contribution and am still doing it into the lot. I haven't earned that money back. I'm spending every day, like you, Kyle and Matt, changing the industry. Business owner, where's yours? Owner, building owner, where's yours? Director, owner's rep, where's yours? We all need to put in and fix this now, because if we don't, we're going to perpetuate the cycle, because it's getting more complex with how much work we have. It's getting more complex because we have a run and a rush on the supply chain. And now because of that panic, we have massive delays, and it's getting more complex because we have less training, and it's becoming more complex. One last thing I want to say is because we've pissed everybody off by treating them like slaves, and now they don't want to work here anymore. So we're going to fix it, or we're going to really continue to take a step backwards, and it's going to get worse and worse. So I'm sorry for that rant, but
no, that's a great rant. I was just thinking, there could be a huge catalyst coming down the pike to force that change too, because there are change makers that are wanting to do it from the grassroots like us, right? But you're not really, no matter what you say, you're not really reaching that boys club in the ivory tower. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The ones that don't want to hear it. I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But with this labor shortage, which is getting worse every year, it's always the skilled trades. Now you're hearing about construction manager shortages, and 81%, according to AGC, 81% of the companies can't find enough project managers, and all these things. So the market always wins, in my opinion. So the companies that are treating the people right are going to be the companies who can get the employees to work for them, and everybody else is just going to dry up and wither away.
Yep. And I'll put my money where my
all
mouth
that
is.
in. I mean,
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and just tying it all in. That's the whole point of this podcast, is reaching those next generations, because as we know, that trade shortage in a few years, it's only going to get worse, and it's going to affect the construction managers and the superintendents and our leaderships on these sites, because that's where they come from. I mean, they all start at that newer level at some point. So,
100%. Yeah, when I'm going to start a construction company, probably 6, 8, 12 months from now, I will have no problem hiring leaders in the company, because I will treat them right. And I can't wait for 2 years from now being like, I don't have a labor shortage. I don't have a shortage of hiring people. And you might want to cut this out, because I'm going to piss some people off with this. Like, every single thing wrong with this industry is our fault. It is the general 100%. Contractors, partly the trade partners, and it's the building owners and the AHJ's fault. Period. End of story. We caused this, and we have got to shut up about with this comment of, oh, it's the skilled trades, it's them, they don't care. It's not true. It's our fault. We caused this. That's it. And we are the ones that can fix this.
Absolutely.
Jason, I think that's a perfect spot to end.
Yeah.
So, hey, real quick, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they find you?
They can email me at jasons@elevateconstructionist.com. They can call me at +1 602-571-8987. I'll give you my address if you promise not to come kill my family or slash my tires. But they can get me on LinkedIn is the preferred way, on the Elevate Construction podcast, or at elevateconstructionist.com. We've got YouTube channels. We've got the whole nine. We'll always reach out. So we're here as a reference. We love you. On we go.
Great.
Jason, I appreciate your time, man. It's been
thanks
great.
So much.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll have to have you back on so we can get you fired up about some more stuff.
Yeah, I love it. I've resorted to some mild shaming for the people that don't get it, that are holding our industry back. So I'm going to be poking on them for another couple of decades. So let's do this.
I'm all on board with poking. I'm on board with poking people.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, this has been fun, Kyle and Matt. You all are great people. So I wish you the best with this podcast. I hope people are listening to you. And I do want to say, if you only have like 50 or 60 listeners so far when you're tracking your numbers, that'll go that'll escalate quickly. I just want to remind you, and I don't know what the numbers are, but when I remember podcast,
you nailed it.
Yeah, I remember podcast number 6. I was like, 60. Is that my grandma and my family? Like, who is that? That's not very many people. And now we have 40,000 downloads a month on our podcast, and so. I just want to give you some hope. You stick with it. It's a long game. It's going to work out, and I believe in what you're doing. So,
Great, thanks,
I appreciate it, Jason. Thanks a lot, man.
Okay, on we go.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, listeners.
See you. Bye.